Yeah, so we may have one of our first abduction cases here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we could indeed. Yeah, and again, perhaps with benign purpose that he was wanted somewhere else, or that somebody was needed fast in another place. It's rather like the way that, if we think about it, just if, and we've got to use a number of conjectures here, if there are highly technical beings who are also benign and caring, in the same way that we, or the best of human beings, take care of animals if they are in danger of extinction, or if there's danger to them of some sort, and we will come and move them from a dangerous area to a safer place. And it does rather make you wonder if there are guys who are as far ahead of us as we are of animals in danger, and they come along and say, hey, if we don't do something about those humanoids down there, they're going to get wiped out. And we've got to get those guys away from that volcano, or we've got to get those guys away from that earthquake zone. And maybe somebody comes along with a message like that and protects us, or some of the benign extraterrestrials, if they exist, are protecting us in the same way that some of the best human beings go out of their way to protect wildlife.
Yeah. Another thing that you talk about in this book, and this is a thing that has interested me, and we already discussed one of the, I suppose you could say, one of the possible places for the Ark of the Covenant's current location, but I believe that there are some places where it is more likely that the Ark of the Covenant could be. And does the Ark of the Covenant have something inside it that possesses some type of power?
I certainly think it does. And I'd like to take this back a stage, if we could, to where the Ark of the Covenant came from. And
okay.
if we go right back to the time of Moses, who during the days when the Israelites were slaves in Egypt, Moses is raised as a hero. Remember, his mother hides him by the banks of the Nile and leaves his sister to watch to see what happens. Along comes Pharaoh's daughter, who sees this little basket floating among the reeds, rescues the infant inside, and bright daughter, big sister of the new baby, because the decree had gone out, the reason that Moses was hidden, of course, was the Egyptians were so afraid of the Israelite slaves that they were killing the boy babies. They were afraid that the Israelites would be able to take them over. And so this was the reason that Moses was hidden in the first place. The sister is watching him carefully and goes running up to Pharaoh's daughter and says, if you want to keep the baby, I know of a nurse. And Pharaoh's daughter says, go and fetch the nurse. That's a good girl. And, of course, she runs back and fetches Moses' mother to be the nurse to her own baby. And so he's brought up in Pharaoh's daughter's palace, nursed by his own mother, who is an Israelite girl. And as he grows, he would not only learn all the things which his adopted mother, the Egyptian princess, can teach him about all the mysteries of the advanced Egyptian civilization, he also learns all the Israelite traditions from his natural mother. Now, we can imagine that when he gets the call to lead his people out of slavery, he, as an Egyptian prince, in effect, or as a very well-placed young Egyptian courtier, he knows of this massively powerful machine, because the Egyptians, and we've researched this carefully and looked into all sorts of angles on it, the Egyptians had arks which they used for religious purposes and perhaps as power sources, because they were always carried on poles that acted as insulators, as if there was some vast force inside which made it dangerous to touch them. And as we know on a number of occasions, the ark has been a power source that, if not handled properly, could be exceptionally dangerous. So let's imagine the situation where Moses has now obtained permission from Pharaoh after the plagues of Egypt. He, Moses, is leading the Israelites out of Egypt to freedom. And he, Moses, knowing what power there is in the ark, has taken this Egyptian power ark, which may be one of their most advanced artifacts. He's taken it with him. Now, Pharaoh then behaves, if we take the biblical account, Pharaoh behaves in what appears to be a completely irrational manner. Moses and the Israelites are crossing the Red Sea. The waters are held back. And the last thing you do, if you are a military commander, either in those days or in ours, is to send chariots, or we might say light tanks, across an area that is likely to flood, because the armor on the tank, the weight of the chariot, the war chariot, will render it totally vulnerable to water. You're better on foot than with one of those things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and in spite of this, Pharaoh, who was otherwise a highly intelligent and rational ruler, launches the cream of the Egyptian cavalry across this flood zone. And of course the water comes crashing back and the cavalry's lost. Now, why did he do it? Was there something, if we put ourselves in his position, if we empathize with him, the most important and powerful thing in Egypt, their most special artifact, has gone with Moses, because Moses knew how powerful it was. And Pharaoh says to his army commanders, at whatever cost, get that back, stop them.
Absolutely, because you wouldn't risk all that simply to bring back your slave labor. You would live to fight another day.
Yep, absolutely, Steve. That's how I think. That's how I think my way through that one. And then whether Moses fully understood what was inside it, but that ark became vitally important to the Israelite people as Moses led them on to their final destination in Palestine. And what I think we have to consider there is, after it had been in a number of difficult situations, it was captured from time to time by the enemy, and sometimes the enemy became ill. Now, one of the accounts says how when enemies of the Israelites had taken the ark, they became ill and wanted to hand it back. Now, does that sound to you and me, with our 21st century advantage of scientific knowledge about radiation, if people don't know that they are in the presence of a powerful radioactive source, if they cluster around it and try to examine it, are they going to come out with ulcers and with skin burns from the radiation burns?
Absolutely.
And once the ark is taken away again by the Israelite owners and is carried very carefully, when you read the detailed account of how the poles had to go through, and you must not touch the ark itself. We know at least one poor guy who did, with the best of intentions, was struck dead by it. Now, believing in a God of love and justice, the God of love and justice doesn't kill a man who, in all honesty, has put his hand forward to prevent a sacred object from being damaged. But if simply the laws of science that are being followed, and if you touch hot iron, you burn yourself, if you touch a dangerous power source, it'll kill you, that then makes a great deal of sense of what happened to the guy who touched the ark with the best of intentions. Now, the great question is, leaving aside all the Harrison Ford films and Indiana Jones, where is the lost ark? Now, the answer to that seems to lie in another very mysterious story. We're not quite sure, and historians and Bible experts tend to disagree about it, but we're not quite sure where the kingdom of Sheba actually was. But we do know from the very detailed historical account that their female ruler, the Queen of Sheba, came to visit Solomon in his luxurious palace and the luxurious temple that he had built in Jerusalem. Now, one of the verses, he gave her great gifts, and she brought him vast wealth as a gift, as a tribute to this great king. But one of the things, and we have to get around the linguistics of this, because you know that the Bible is rather coy about people who are having sex. They would say, and it came to pass that she married this king or that king, and she lay with him and she conceived. They use the phrase, she lay with him, for they had sex. Now, there's another phrase which, again, linguistic scholars may think through carefully. The Queen of Sheba and Solomon are talking together, and she's staying in the palace. And the phrase is, and he gave her all that her heart desired. Now, that could be one of these rather coy phrases, rather like she lay with him, meaning they had sex. He gave her all that her heart desired. She desired to have sex with him and to get pregnant by him. And then, if you follow the Ethiopian history, she has a son who is known when she gets back home to her kingdom, and this boy is referred to as the son of the wise man. His Ethiopian name means the son of the wise man, and he was the founder of an Ethiopian dynasty which went all the way down to, in the last century, Haile Selassie, who was such a hero during the Second World War, and who was, who greatly appealed by his patriotism against the Axis forces to Britain and America and the other allies. That Haile Selassie was regarded as a great independence fighter and a good guy, and he was in this same dynasty, which, if we can believe the Ethiopian records, in other words, if their historical records are reliable, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be, that he was a remote descendant of the great and good King Solomon, and that dynasty had lasted 2,000 years very nearly. So the thought is that when Sheba's son grew to manhood, she told him who his father was, and Solomon had, in this Ethiopian tradition, given her a ring by which she could identify the boy. And the boy, having grown to manhood, Mum gives him the ring which King Solomon had given to her for that purpose, and sends him off to see Solomon with a retinue of his Ethiopian courtiers and a small bodyguard to get him there safely. And Solomon, in the Ethiopian account, greets him warmly, and as we are now coming towards the end of Solomon's reign, although he himself has been exceptionally able and powerful, there are various forces in contention because the emperor is now getting old. Who is going to take over? And as we know, the kingdom, which had been united under Solomon, split between Jeroboam and Rehoboam. And the 10 tribes moved away from the control of the central power. And so instead of being 12 united tribes, there were 10 and 2. Now, if Solomon saw those troubles coming, and he was exceptionally able, the Ethiopian account says that he entrusted the ark